a lot of what we've been discussing here, soulmates and puzzle pieces and all of these kinds of things, is around black and white thinking. Whether or not we see people or see relationships as they are. So what are some warning signs that we're using too much black and white thinking?
I mean, I notice it in myself when I feel really reactive and clingy and just kind of like validate me, like complete this part of me. Like, why aren't you doing this thing? Like when I get really frustrated and there's no like really good objective reason, it's usually like I've referenced shadows before, that Jungian idea of this hurt part of you or this traumatic part of you. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but like that's trying to get this thing, out of this person, and it's just not coming out of them because that's not who they are, and also they can't heal you. But like I notice it then, like I can feel it. I can feel this discomfort. I'm with a partner right now who brings out, shadows inside of me, and I had a lot of opportunities to be like, you're this way and I don't like it and we're not compatible, but it feels so much different. It feels like this clingy, needy kind of thing. And that's where I'm like, oh, I need to reflect on myself and what is going on inside of me, and whether this person is actually doing anything problematic or not, or whether they're just being autonomous and being themselves. And there's something that I can learn about my background and the things that I haven't healed yet. So I just look for that nasty feeling in my stomach, that clinging kind of feeling.
Yeah, this may be a little bit reductive, but a psychologist named William Glasser published a theory that basically came down to the idea that suffering comes from trying to control things that we can't, which is literally everything other than our own choices, or the attempts of others to control us. So pain, in his mind, from a psychological standpoint, was trying to control other people and other people trying to control us, rather than just allowing each other to be. And so I find that when I'm in pain, it's probably a good sign that I am being a little bit black and white or a little bit controlling in those ways. Rudy, what stands out to you?
I can definitely relate to that. I have found a lot of times in my own relationship that I'm currently in that I'll find myself getting upset and thinking like, why doesn't he do this? Why isn't he like this? And it's like, because he's not. Like, I don't like he doesn't need a reason to not be this image that I have or doing these exact things, because it's not like he's doing anything bad. It's just different from me, different from how I would have done it. And that's fine. And so it took me a while to sort of get into that mindset of realizing when I was getting upset about something that was just basically just things not going exactly the way that I wanted them to. Not bad. They weren't going bad. They just weren't exactly what I wanted. And it's like, well, that's life. Tough shit. My partner isn't doing anything bad to me. And I can just express verbally, I'd really like it if you did this. But if you don't, I won't be mad, because maybe that's just not your thing.
There's a lot of nuance here, because like the last thing I want people taking away from this is when I get angry, it's my fault because they're being themselves,
Sure.
and that therefore I need to just deal with this. So there's some nuance there that like I just want folks to keep in mind. But as an example, like the partner that an additional partner that I presently have is there's certain things that he's done that stick out to me in the moment, and I sit there just kind of like shocked, like what the fuck did he just do that for? Like he'll just, we'll be talking and he'll just stand up and just kind of walk away because he needed to go take care of something. Like he was thirsty, he needed to pee, whatever. And like, just no fanfare, no, hey, just a second, I need to go and pee or whatever. Like he just gets up and walks away. And like, I just sit there shocked, like, that's not how you do that. and so there's that reaction at first. And then there's that anger, like, dude, what's wrong with you? You're so selfish. Why didn't you, dust me in sugar before you left? But then I am trying to approach this relationship and all relationships going forward with curiosity. And so I ask myself, what did I expect? And why should that be what is expected? So I expected him to coddle me before he left to take care of his needs. And I'm upset about that because I don't give myself permission to get up and go take care of my needs. I always sit and I stay and I wait until I feel like I have permission to take care of myself. So the things that frustrate me about my partner are the very qualities that I want to grow into. So
No,
that's what
I feel like I need to call my own therapist and say, I just had a revelation watching Secular Sexuality, because I relate to that a lot. This idea that the places where that we are not responsible for our own pain, but we are often causing our own pain in a lot of ways. And the fact that we are upset with our partner doesn't mean that we are responsible for that, or that we need to be apologetic or fix that or whatever else, but instead that we can notice the places where we have these expectations, and those expectations, when they are around the way that we're treated and some boundaries and some limitations on lines that we don't want crossed, are very different from when we have these like unmet demands, especially when those demands aren't being examined. So if that's one of them, what are some of the other blind spots or maybe pitfalls that you notice yourself or other people falling into?
That's a pretty broad question.
Sure.
Christy, come on.
Well, it's fair to say. I guess what I am getting at is that I will often find myself being like frustrated with my partner over something that hasn't actually happened, or that is like sort of a thought of what could happen, or some, preparatory anxiety. And I think that that's a real sign that I'm getting very black and white. And it's one of the blind spots that I kind of notice in my own life. Do y'all have any examples in that vein?
When my partner and I first started dating, and for maybe the first 2 years of our relationship, it was an ongoing, repeatedly coming up thing that he would assign intent to things that I said or did or didn't say or didn't do. And it was almost always malicious or manipulative intent. And that was something that we kind of had to work through. But I find that I do the same thing in smaller ways sometimes. But I think that's something that comes up for a lot of people, is you very much piggybacking off of what Marie's been saying about shadows and stuff. Like, you have your own issues, your own problems, and you start projecting that onto other people. Like, oh, you just think that you just want me to go along with what you're going to do. So you said this way to just get me to go with it and guilt me. And it's like, whoa, I was just saying what I wanted to do. I wasn't trying to guilt you at all. But if you feel like I'm guilting you, do you do that to me sometimes? Is that a thing that you do? Is that a thing that you think is like normal behavior for people, is to go around guilting each other like that? But it's not always that. Sometimes it's like trauma. Like, hey, my mom used to talk to me that way all the time, and so I kind of just expect that anytime you bring up what you want to do, you just want me to go with it. Otherwise, there's going to be an argument. It's like, no. That's not it at all. But, it's, I guess it's something that I think of because there's sort of the opposite of the thinking that your partner is everything and supposed to fill in all these gaps in your heart or whatever. The other side of that is that they are just going to treat you as shittily as everybody else has ever treated you shittily, and assigning malicious intent to things that hurt you or things that might have hurt you, that's definitely a pitfall you want to stay away from. You know, if your partner hurts you, like, tell them, ask them why they did that. Don't assume that it was to hurt you. Yeah.
And more broadly, are we talking here about story writing? Like, that's all we do all day long is we write stories about ourselves and about other people. And so, Rudy, when you brought up the term malicious intent, it made me think about this partner that's really stretching me, is this discussion that we had about texts, and we talk about his mind and how his mind works, and he gets overwhelmed and indecisive, and whereas I'm like, let's have all the discussions, let's have it right now, and I'm texting him and I'm like, here's a question, and then in follow up to that question, this question, and if that question is true, then how about this question? And he doesn't, for the longest time, he wouldn't respond to all of my questions. He would like just maybe respond to one, and trying to be curious. I was like, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. I want to feel really insecure and be like, oh, he thinks I'm too much. He thinks I'm asking too much. He thinks I'm demanding too much. He thinks I want to talk too much. Shadows. And I was kind of thinking that I was telling that story to myself. I was trying not to, but I was telling that story to myself. And then the other night we talked, and I'm like, it came up, and I'm like, so he was actually telling me, he's like, so sometimes you send me a lot of questions and I get overwhelmed and I don't know which question to answer. And so I just pick one. That's precious. There's anxiety. There's anxiety behind him instead of malicious intent. We have these stories where we want to make someone into the enemy. We're taking these narratives from our childhood and projecting them onto other people so that we can protect ourselves. Like, this is an adaptive thing, but if we're going to learn and grow, we need to see how it might not be relevant in this situation. And so, like Rudy said, talk about it. And that's what I'm learning with this partner. There's so many things I don't understand about him, and there's all these stories that want to be written, and they make me feel very insecure. And so I tell him, you infuriate me, but it's because his behavior inflames that hurt part of me. And so what I'm learning to do is to just ask and just to say, I notice that, you know, when I behave this way, you do this, and the story that I'm hearing in my head, talk about the story. Don't say, it's because you this. Talk about the story. I'm noticing my head and my story. The story wants to say, it's because you think I'm too much. And can you tell me what's happening on your side? And that's where you get the opportunity to see their humanity and see how they're just being human in the relationship too, and they're not an enemy. They're not trying to hurt you. Well, not
necessarily trying.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, that is my partner and I have had so many conversations that were that basically predicated on the phrase, when you do that, it makes me feel. Not assigning blame, not assigning intent, just you did this, and that's how I feel, and this is my resulting emotion in response to that. Whether that was what you intended, whether or not I'm even justified in feeling that way, or if it's my own shit in my own head that's making me feel that way and not a fault of you at all, that's how I feel about it. And those are a lot of conversations we have had to have between the two of us. And on a slightly more humorous maybe note, going off of that, I've also found that sometimes if you have somebody whose opinion you trust, who's outside of that relationship, sort of going to them and being like, all right, you know how when sometimes your partner does something that infuriates you and you want to look for a reason to be mad? Like, you're like, I'm mad and I'm going to justify it, and he just did this and this and this. I have this one friend who always tells it to be straight. She has never sugarcoated anything in her life. Not even to me, her very best friend. And she's the person that I call and is like, all right, he said this to me, and I got pissed off, and I said some choice words, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. And she's like, no, you are not. You are not. You are not right. You need to go apologize to him. That was obviously not what he was thinking when he said that. It could have been a myriad of things, which I will list off right now. You made that assumption and you blew up. You need to go apologize to him right now. So if you have somebody like that in your life who you trust to not just automatically take your side or not sugarcoat things just to give you an outside perspective, because sometimes you are too in your own head to like really, I don't know, be empathetic, which, you know, sounds terrible, but really it's like just being able to see it from your partner's perspective of maybe this isn't the story that my brain is writing. Sometimes that can be really hard. So
yeah, I think that that sort of misattribution of intent is a great example of what we're talking about here, and especially in text messages. I mean, if you take nothing away from this entire conversation other than to be charitable in your interpretation of your partner's text messages, I think you'll be well on your way to a happier, healthier relationship. But I want to really hone in on something that Rudy said earlier about how oftentimes we might attribute things to malice or selfishness or whatever else, when in actuality, what we're looking at is trauma. And I think that there's real value in extending a little bit of compassion, not just to our partners, but to ourselves here as we are on this like journey to sort of root out all of this black and white thinking. I think we can get into kind of like whack-a-mole and self-assassination territory where we're like, no, don't think that way. No, don't think that way. Don't think that way. And that don't think about pink elephants type approach can really get us into trouble. And if we come in with a little bit of compassion and say, oh, wow, when I do this, it reminds you of the way your mother treated you, and that was a really difficult time. I can have feelings for that. Or, hey, when you do this thing that is absolutely not wrong or bad or evil in any kind of like spiritual or magical kind of way, but when you do it, it hurts me. It bothers me in some way. It brings up some of my own trauma, and I can have compassion for myself for sometimes being a little irrational. Sometimes being a little bit emotional. Those feelings are valid, even if they are unpleasant, even if they are unhelpful, and even if they're not particularly grounded in reality.
The way that I sort of learned to handle irrational emotions like that is just from acknowledging my own phobias, because phobias are by nature pretty much always irrational, right? You know, you're afraid of spiders for no apparent reason. There's no venomous spiders in my area. I've never seen a venomous spider in my life. The ones that I have seen have never bitten me. I'm still afraid of them. And I would never go up to somebody who has a phobia and tell them like, well, you know, that's silly, right? Like, you don't have to be upset about that. Just don't be upset about that. It's nothing, you know. Exactly.
Have you tried not being a little whiny bitch? Like, it's just a spider. It's fine.
But apply that to other people and apply that to yourself when somebody can say, I'm feeling this way, and maybe I have no good reason to feel this way, but for whatever reason I feel this way, and it's just like, okay, I accept that is the case. Whatever we need to do to work around that, we'll do, you know?
And I think there's a skill for the person that's receiving that information about, like, there's a person that's like, oh, I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling this trauma come up and blah, blah, blah. And the skill that it takes to talk about that. I think there's a skill on the other end of that we could talk about just a teeny bit, which is holding space for that trauma. And when I mean holding space, it's just allowing that to be present. Because I think the stereotypical reaction to someone saying, oh, you triggered me, you're reminding me of my mom or whatever, is defensiveness. Like they're attacking your character. They're insinuating that you're like their mother. And if we have a partner who's communicating in a healthy way about this, and if we know this information about projecting shit out and replaying all these narratives from our childhood, then it's easier for us to just open up our heart to my partner saying, dude, when you did that, it really, really hurt, and it really brought me back to this really painful time in my life. And I can sit there and not let it penetrate my identity and my worth, and just and put all of my attention onto them and what they're experiencing, and seeing the pain inside of them. And then, of course, making space for any practical adjustments that need to be made, of course. But it's not about, that's a simplistic way to put it, but it's not about you in so much as, like, you don't really need to defend yourself. Just show up for the conversation, see, what potential growth is available for that dynamic. And then the second thing I wanted to say, and it was something a friend said to me, my friend Luke King, and I'm pretty sure he got it from somewhere else, but I don't remember where it was. So he's going to get this quote now, is because he was encouraging me to do this. He said, Marie, let people feel the full weight of who you are. Because sometimes I chop off my arm and throw it over there, chop off my leg, throw it over there, and say, is this okay? Like, will you accept me if I get rid of all these nasty parts? If I'm not emotional, if I don't have a reaction, if I don't have trauma that comes up, if I don't have needs, if I don't take up space, if I'm not too talkative, if I'm not too, demanding, if I don't have sensory issues, and need to go home after going on errands and shit like that, let people feel the full weight of who you fucking are. That's what I want to say, and not in a way that's like just hurt and bulldoze everybody over and be like, this is who I am, but just like allow yourself to be human,
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. As somebody who spent their teenage years cutting off chunks and then just like hiding them in a drawer to put back on later when I was around nice people. Like, it's like, all right, around my family, get rid of this one and that one, and then I'll just put them back on when I go to school. No fun. I'm so over that. That's like my life motto now, is like, everybody's gonna feel the full weight of me all the time. Suck it up.
Well, my next curiosity was around this idea of, okay, if we're not ones or zeros, and if we're not going to see our partner as like an angel or a demon, then how do we categorize them? How do we see them or think of them? And I feel like what I'm hearing from both of you is to see them in their entirety, their warts and all, with nothing chopped off. I mean, how close is that to the way you see this?
That's it. Yeah, that is it.
Allow them to be as complex and messy as you are. Allow them to be as ever evolving as you are. Like, they're just as complex. They're just as confusing. They're just as human. They're just as unaware. We're all just a bunch of messes. And I think I tend to project perfection or malevolence. I make people either good or bad. Like, you're good people, you're bad people, when really we are a mixture of light and dark mixed all together. And I know I keep using these wooey metaphors, but no one else has a better way of saying it, so follow me here. But like, I've got darkness inside of me, I've got beauty inside of me. I am all of the things, and I don't want any partner looking at me like I'm perfect or that I'm evil or whatever. It's just we're complicated, and I think I have a history of looking towards my partner to be perfect, to be that almost like I needed to be submissive to a patriarch figure. I'm not sure where I got that from. Just kidding. I do. But like, things I've been learning over my relationships is that men are just as fucked up as I am. I think being raised as a woman in this culture, I was subconsciously taught that men have it all together. They handle their feelings. They love being in control and being leaders, and they always know what's going on, and they're in charge of the dynamic and the development of the relationship, and you just need to kind of make sure that you fit within what they need. But the more I date, the more I find that men, like, I mostly date men are just as emotionally complicated as I am. They cry just as much as I do. They have needs for love just as much as I do. Like, we're not dating anyone other than ourselves, really, but just with the codes, the ones and the zeros are a little bit, differently arranged, but we're really all the same. Like, I'm going to go there. Well, it's a little bit wooey, but we are all kind of the same, just on different journeys and different points.
Mm-hmm.
You said that, I flashed back to watching The Lion King 2 as a kid. There's a bit where there's two warring prides of lions, and and one of the lions is just like, look at those lions and look at these lions. We are all lions. What is the problem here? Like, what? They are us. We are them. What's the issue?
Yeah. Or like the Dr. Seuss book about the characters, they have the star on the belly versus the...
Yes.
We've literally been learning this shit since we were children. How do we not get it?
Yeah. By the way, thank you for recapping the plot of Lion King 2 as if that was necessary for this audience.
Right.
It's
of course, we're all like low key furries because of that movie. Just like on the DL, some of us are more high key furries, but
Sure. Well, before we jump back onto the phones, I guess I wanted to just touch very briefly, Marie, with how the poly community may have something to teach us here. I want to be really mindful of not just like plucking wisdom out from the queer community to distribute to the masses, but as we're talking about allowing relationships to grow and evolve naturally rather than trying to force them into a script or onto a particular escalator, that really feels like the place to go for me. So what kind of insights do you feel like we can learn here?
Well, as the elected representative of the poly community, we have a manifesto.
I didn't get the manifesto. Somebody didn't put me in the
update your email address, Rudy.
Seriously, you haven't been on the list.
I keep getting the mail demons from you.
What's funny to me is that they're very much like polyamory, more so than maybe any other community, is a listserv type community.
We're very organized, yes.
Very.
We have to be to coordinate all this stuff ethically.
Right?
Yeah. And the stuff I've been learning in poly, it changes year to year. I've been practicing polyamory for about 4 years, and even just the fact that I called myself polyamorous in the beginning, and now I'm like, I don't know, ethically non-monogamous, whether I love you or not, we'll find out. So that's evolved, that whole idea. But I've dated a handful of people over the last couple of years, and each one teaches me something new about this idea of the one or of the perfect fit or any of that stuff, because I've had many different partners and they've all been very different from each other, and yet I really like all of them and have enjoyed my relationships with all of them. And I think the relationship I'm in right now, though, is especially illuminating a lot to me, like I've kind of talked about previously, in that what I want to say is being curious about a relationship and letting it unfold however it unfolds, instead of trying to guide it in a certain way, trying to make it be a certain way. Just releasing control and noticing how the person is, instead of waiting for them to fulfill what you hope that they're going to be, opens up so many doors to relationships you never thought that you were going to have. The partner I'm with right now, I never would have dated him in the past, because there's a very hurt part of me that is very inflamed around parts of his personality. But in poly, I've had this opportunity to date different types, and this person I'm just approaching with curiosity, and it's illuminated who I am by being open to different people and seeing what relationships with different people do to how you see yourself. And poly has just blown my mind wide open. This is maybe somewhat relevant, but before poly, I fucking hated myself. And I'm in the conclusion of that isn't, well, no, I fuck everyone and I think I'm great. No, that's not where that goes. How that happened is that my husband started dating someone, and lots of jealousy, so much jealousy, lots of shadows of insecurity, of not being good enough of a woman for the cishet white community of men. And so much of that came up, and I expressed a lot of curiosity towards myself. I invested a lot of time in understanding where that came from. And boom, one day, a year and a half later, yes, a year and a half of jealousy. It was painful. But a year and a half later, I looked at myself and I was like, wait, do I want to be her? Or do I actually like who I am? And I said to myself, I finally was like, shit, I like me. And poly was that opportunity to finally project this archetype of the perfect woman onto someone else who's sleeping with my husband, and really having to look myself in the mirror and say, am I a valuable partner in this relationship? Am I a valuable person? Do I have things to contribute? Am I worthwhile? Do I like who I am, even though I don't look like this or that or this or that, and I don't act this way or that way? Poly has opened me up to loving myself. With or without my husband, with or without my partners. I know my fucking worth now because I dealt with that demon. So poly has done a lot for me. It's really revealed a lot about myself. I never intended it to be a tool for that. I just want to say I'm not trying to use people for therapy. Sure. Like, let's see what trauma comes up when I hang out with you. But it happens, and it happens to all of us, whether we know it or not, whether we're excited about it or not. I tend to be excited about it, but it does happen to all of us. But I could talk about it for a very long time, but I'll just kind of keep it brief at that poly has allowed me to see myself, to see other people more deeply, and to open my mind to connections with people I never thought that I would have. And then to becoming intimate with those people, really challenging the way that my entire brain is networked. Like it's incredible. So I just can't imagine what my life would be like if I was just hanging out with one person. It would be just such a small world inside of my mind.
Love it. No, appreciate you sharing your experience with us.